I've been rereading Game of Thrones and was reminded about the fact that the very first chapter, the prologue chapter, is absolutely mesmerizing and one of the best in the entire book. The character writing from the very beginning is just incredible, especially from Waymar Royce. Oh my god, Waymar Royce, the journey that he goes on within these few pages makes for one of the most memorable introductions and then unfortunate conclusions I've read. The story starts off typical enough, giving us a sort of stereotypical three-person party. You have the gruff and rough Garrett, 40 years at the Night's Watch. He is the veteran of the party. You have Will, smaller, meek, 4 years at the Night's Watch, experienced in his own right, but clearly a little more nervous. And of course, young Waymar Royce, 18 years old, a nobleman, and he is cocksure as hell. From those three alone, you're kind of getting the idea in your head that what's going to happen is that Waymar gets his comeuppance for being so cocky, and he dies, so technically speaking, it kind of happens, but it's not in such a linear, generic fashion. The journey that he goes on, especially, is immensely satisfying by the end, and the fact that Will is the POV character really only adds to that feeling. Anyway, they're on the trail for wildlings, and Will feels this sense of unease in the air, something cold and implacable that loved him not, a feeling that is shared by the experienced Ranger Garrett, but of course not by our brash Commander Royce. And yet, again, even in the face of literally dying, Waymar Royce manages to show his insight and legitimate potential as a commander, even if he still dies. Will finds the wildlings dead, and Garrett says they simply must have died because of the cold, in what is just the most artistic way he could have, by the way. And yet, outside of a snide remark, without missing a beat, Waymar asks Will how he found the wall. And that's where we get one of my favorite Gurmisms as an aside. Instead of simply saying that the wall was melting, Will says that he found the wall weeping, which is one of my favorite acts of characterization in the entire book. As we get farther and farther into the story, the wall gets more and more mysterious, more and more magical. It seemingly defends itself. Of course, there's the horn that's meant to bring the wall down. We don't know the history. We don't know who truly built the wall because it seems so unnatural, so magical, and describing it as weeping is that first little hint, that first little sign, like something is alive here. Or that it's just that majestic. Either way, I just love it. Back to Waymar. He's using this because it justifies the reason to continue their ranging. The wildlings could not have frozen to death. They died from what are still mysterious reasons, and that in his head, aside from ego, is a need-to-know basis for the Night's Watch. They cannot simply go back under the impression and under a lie that they froze to death, that they have to continue. That is the insight that I love from Waymar. It's one of the, well, two moments. It's a short chapter that shows his potential at being a commander, at being a true brother of the Night's Watch. Again, even if it's an ego-driven decision, it's a good decision in that sense to find out why, even if it ends in death. By the end of it, really, it's a battle between the good reasoning of Waymar, his justifications, versus the gut instinct and experience of Will and Garrett. And that is Waymar's flaw. As we go throughout the story, we see a lot of people simply disregard the Night's Watch. A lot of them hold that same supernatural feeling that you don't know what's out there beyond the wall. And Waymar shares the same one with many of the other noblemen. If he managed to live through this, if he got that missing piece, he would have become something truly incredible for the Night's Watch. We reach the others. Of course, they're described immaculately as well, especially the armor and the sword. The armor, this almost camouflage within the snow, and the sword, crystal-like, so sharp that when you turn it edgewise, it almost vanishes from sight. And then we reach the defining moment of the chapter and Waymar. "Come no further," his voice cracked like a boy's. He's afraid, who wouldn't be? And yet, as the other draws its blade out, this boy of the Night's Watch, this lordling, this boy that Garrett and Will laughed into their cups about and said he wasn't fit to lead, he meets its eyes. Sir Waymar met him bravely. "Dance with me, then." His hands trembled from the weight of it, or perhaps from the cold. Yet, in that moment, Will thought he was a boy no longer, but a man of the Night's Watch. What a scene! In that moment, Waymar completed his character's journey over the course of the chapter. "Dance with me, then," 5 books later, is still one of the most badass moments in the entire series. It gives me chills every single time I read it. In that moment, Waymar gave up his life and honor and duty to the Night's Watch, even if moments later he died because of it. That's the climax of the chapter, of course, but Will is still alive, so Will still needs to die, and even that's described quite nicely, I'd say. Long, elegant hands tightened around his throat. They were gloved in the finest moleskin and sticky with blood, yet the touch was icy cold. I mean, what a way to start your series. No wonder it captivated so many people. I even now long for Waymar to be alive, to come back, because of what he did in that chapter, because of the potential that he showed, just thinking about what he could have become had he lived. Also, some closing thoughts. I like that Garrett is the one that runs away instead of Will in the show, because it adds a lot more weight to the fact that he was willing to abandon the Night's Watch and accept his execution after all the years that he'd been there. No one is more aware of the consequences than Garrett would be, so given that he's the one that dies in the end, it adds a lot more weight to his words. I also think that Waymar serves as this great initial example of how Gurm truly loves to write death, as opposed to the general perception that I feel like it tends to have, especially after the show. I feel like there was this idea that the main focus of the death should be on the shock and awe of it. The fact that anyone can die, just the very idea of death is the insane part. You'll get pictures of people, talking about how many characters died, and just, like sticky notes within a book showing how many characters died. And I feel like that's the wrong perspective to take on it, because Waymar shows that the death should matter in the end. It should be the end of his character's journey. It should have some sort of logical conclusion. It shouldn't just be a nonsensical bloodbath. With moments like the Red Wedding, while yes, they're shocking in the moment and you can't believe that it happened, afterwards when you think about it, you can see the many, many, many mistakes and moments that led up to it happening, and you can see the reasoning behind it and the justification. It's the same with Waymar. He made mistakes, he created his own reasonings, and he essentially led himself into that death, but he also didn't just die for the sake of it. He died after completing his journey. And that's a really incredible thing that Gurm managed to do, because death is super hard to write in stories. He managed to do it in a way where it is narratively satisfying, but still feels like there's a constant threat to every single character, but not that they're just, meat machines to just be thrown away one after the other to just say, anyone can die here. It's satisfying and still tense. Also, the book starts with the White Walkers, the others, and it will end with them. It will not end with these stupid, petty conflicts of people. It will be about them surviving, and it will be about them dealing with this conflict. At least that's how it's supposed to end. It's how it should end. It's how it probably will end. If it ends at all. I'm forever optimistic.